Okay, first of all, I would like to thank the NAS, thank you, and Autism-Europe for inviting me for a keynote. I'm indeed very nervous, but also very honored, because a little shrimp from Belgium is standing at this stage. I'm especially also proud and happy that I was invited to speak at a conference that has this motto: happy, healthy, and empowered. And I would like to do a little exercise with all of you. I hope you're in for some jam session. I want all of you to raise your hand, and you can choose whether it's your left or your right hand. Come on, everybody raises their hand. Okay, now, those of you, and I will ask you 3 questions. If the answer is yes, you keep your hand up. If the answer is no, you lower your hand. Okay, everybody has his hand up? Nice. Those of you who don't want to be happy, lower your hand. Do you want to be happy? Yes, keep it up. No, get it down. Do you want to be healthy? Yes, keep it up. No, get it down. Do you want to be in charge of your own life? Yes, keep it up. If you want others to decide what life you should live, get it down. Look around now. We all have our hands up. So these are the things that we all want in life, don't we? Now, I think the past 70 years we have been focusing on autism, and especially looking at the differences between autistic and non-autistic people. And that was good. We needed to do that in order to understand autism. But it's time to think about the similarities, I think. And the similarities are the same basic human needs. I know there's now this popular term called neurodiversity, and it has become popular since Steve Silberman's book, Neurotribes. And I do like the idea of neurodiversity, because it's all about there's not such a thing as a normal brain. We all have different brains, and we need to accept and respect diversity in terms of the neurological differences, just as there are differences in gender. I like the idea, but I think we need to go a step further. So therefore, in my presentation, I will introduce 2 new terms to you. And the first one I would like to introduce is building up on this term of neurodiversity. I think, okay, we all have different brains, but what we need to aim at is neuroharmony, to bring all those brains together in a harmony. And as you know, harmony, a term from music, it's about all different notes that sound together very nicely. I think we need to do the same thing now with autism, trying to see the like-mindedness of autistic and non-autistic brains in terms of our basic human needs, such as happiness, health, and empowerment. And that's what I hope to do in the next 38 minutes left. Now, I'm supposed to talk about outcome. And what is outcome? Ever since they realized that autism is a lifelong condition, and we should not only talk about autistic children, people and researchers have been interested in what happens with autistic children when they grow up. What is the outcome? And there's now many, many studies, and I won't summarize them, it would take us too far. What I'm interested in is what are the criteria researchers use to say that someone has a good outcome or a bad outcome. Now, these are the criteria that they use. They look whether autistic adults have a job or not, employment. And why is that so? Because as a society, we value people with a job more than people who are unemployed, for the simple reason that the ones with a job pay taxes, and the other ones cost us a lot of money. The same is true for all the other areas. We seem to value people with a lot of friends, and I'm not talking about Facebook here, but people with a lot of friends more than people who say, I have no one. People who are healthy are valued more in our society than people who cost us a lot for medical treatments. We seem to appreciate high IQs more than lower IQs. Okay, autism is being more accepted, but talking about people with intellectual disabilities, well, that's still a hard thing to do. People who live on their own and who are independent, we value them more than those who live at home. Well, I know that many 25-year-olds still live at Hotel Mama. It's the best and the cheapest hotel you can get. But if you're 46 and they ask you where you live and you say, I still live with my mama, you're not being very successful. And of course, the autism symptoms. Those are the things we value as a society. And there's a shortcoming here. I want to illustrate that with two case studies. Now, on the left, you see Peter. He's one of the guys holding a handkerchief. Now, he lives in a group home. So according to the international research criteria for outcome, that's a poor outcome. He doesn't have a job. He goes to a daycare center where he does activities. Again, low score. Okay, he's healthy. Does he have friends? Oh, yes. If you ask him, do you have friends, he will start naming all the names of his staff members. Low score on relationships. Low score on IQ. He's not having an average intelligence. So you see, poor outcome. But you know what? He likes his staff members. He likes the activities they organize for him, like music activities, because he likes music. He likes to swim, and they take him to the swimming pool 3 times a week. So he's having a good life, but a poor outcome. On the right, you see Mark. Well, actually, you don't see Mark, but you see his apartment. Mark has a university degree, high score on education. He does have a job, but not as a lawyer. He fills the shelves in a supermarket, and he says that's way below my level. He does have friends on the internet, and he had friends who visited his apartment, but they don't do that anymore for obvious reasons, as you can see. There's no place to sit. And he feels a bit lonely about that. He lives independently, yes. He can cook while he goes to fast food markets, as you can see. So he has a good outcome according to research criteria, but actually he's not very happy with the life he lives. So I'm asking you, if you had to trade places, would you like to be Peter, who has a poor outcome according to the international criteria, or would you like to live Mark's life, who has a good outcome? I know which one I would choose. In other words, objective criteria don't say much about quality of life. Now, in other words, when we're talking about the measuring of outcomes in autism, I think we should use the objective criteria. They do make sense. They are societal norms, but I think we should focus more on the subjective criteria, and then we're talking about well-being. And we don't do that yet. Not yet enough. Just as an example, this is a publication from 2014 giving an overview of all the evidence-based practices for young people with an autism spectrum disorder. And what I was interested in was not to see which kind of therapies or treatments that are evidence-based, but what were these therapies and programs and these practices aiming at? In other words, what were the goals? What was the desired outcome? And I think it's no surprise to you that the large majority of the programs we have developed for children and young people with autism are aiming at improving their communication skills, their social skills, and addressing challenging behavior. And to be honest, I think it's appalling that barely 0.2% of the programs are aiming at well-being. I think we should all be ashamed here. Now, there is, however, recently, an increase in the interest of well-being in autistic people. But then from a rather negative point of view, which means, and I'm sure they will be covered at this conference here, there's a lot of interest into what is called mental health issues, comorbidity, autism plus. And indeed, we do know that there is an increased risk for people who have an autistic brain to develop once in their life or several times things like an anxiety disorder or depression. On the right, you see the lifetime prevalence, the chance you will get one of these mental health issues during your lifetime. On the left, you see the results. I'm summarizing a lot of research here of autistic people. And you see there's indeed a huge increase in risk. So, in a way, there is attention for well-being in autism, but rather from the point of focusing on the negative feelings, depression, anxiety, low self-esteem. And symptomatic for this is that we have developed, the community, autism community, we have developed a lot of tools to measure these mental health issues. There are now questionnaires measuring anxiety in autistic people. There is the development of a stress survey schedule. At Autism Central, we have developed a stress schedule as well. There are now sensory profiles showing what the sensory difficulties and issues are for people with autism. And, you know, I think that reflects a rather negative definition of happiness, because it defines happiness as the absence of negative feelings. And that would be the same as defining a happy marriage as, yes, that couple is happy, they have a good marriage because they're not divorced yet. That would be the same. So I think we should move on from a negative definition of happiness towards a more positive one. And there's two ways to do that. One way is, well, it's a way that was already suggested by a British psychiatrist about 25 years ago. Maybe we should pathologize happiness and try to get it into DSM. Maybe then we will get attention for happiness and classify it as a psychiatric disorder, because then there will be a lot of money studying happiness. One possible objection to this proposal, obviously, is that most people have a rather positive value towards happiness. So, no, this won't work. There's another way. Let's just make a U-term. And a U-term means let's put happiness on the agenda in autism. Now, researchers have been discussing this whole concept of happiness, and the remarkable thing is that there is no exact definition, but I think most of us have some folk psychology idea about what happiness is. And usually when I have a workshop on this, then I ask people to make a drawing of a situation that they think reflects, you know, a good and happy life. And you can make the drawing in your head. There's no time to make it in real. Try to picture a situation that you think, wow, I would like to be there now, and feel totally happy and relaxed and having joy and pleasure. I think most of you would have a picture something like that. Wouldn't you? Well, the funny thing is that there's two things wrong with this picture. First of all, it's not realistic. Most people cannot live such a life because continuous exaltation is impossible. We have good moments and bad moments. So a more realistic picture of happiness is this one. Now, the second thing why this is wrong is that most people think of happiness as, if I would be rich, earn more money, if I would be in a nice climate, I would be happier. And especially, that's something that happens here in Scotland. And I do know the saying, today's rain is tomorrow's whiskey, but now, although most people think that having more money and moving to a warmer climate, that they think that would make me more happy, there's research on that. And research has shown that moving to Australia will increase your well-being only by 1 to 2%. I know there are Australians here, so they have invited me to talk there next year. Probably they will now withdraw their invitation after this. Oh, by the way, there are a lot of animals in my presentation. This is a kangaroo, and on request, it was on Twitter, I have a lot of puppies as well. I'm a bit cross at Fred. He already started with it, with the bulldog at the end. But I have puppies. Unfortunately, I think he should have used a brown bear. He's from the States. So no brown bears in my presentation. And I just deserved a bottle of whiskey here, I think. Now, if it's not this, what is it then? Now, the thing we often think of is the pleasant life. You know, joy, pleasure, positive feelings, but that's only one aspect of life. I will also cover the second one, namely the meaningful life. On the left one is what you could call the hedonic aspects of happiness. The right one is the eudaimonic aspects of life. Difficult words. The one means joy, pleasure. The rest means being proud of who you are and having a purpose in life, personal growth. Okay. Now, I think these are the ones that we should measure now as an outcome, rather than only the standard criteria. And why so? Because there is indeed research that shows that the subjective well-feeling is lower in autistic people. There is now some research that gives evidence for this. Just two examples. One is a Dutch study by Petra Barneveld, and she did research with around 170 adults who were in the normal IQ range, so to speak, young adults, And she measured both the objective and the subjective quality of life. And as a remarkable result, she found that except for physical condition, these adults, and you saw the title, I know I can't use the word, but it was in the title of the study, high functioning. Although these people were so-called high functioning, they were less pleased and satisfied with how they lived, with their work and their education, their relationships and their future perspective. And you should know that the control group in this study was not so-called neurotypical people, but adults with other child psychiatric disorders, such as ADHD. So they even score lower than those groups. This is a slide I stole from Richard Mills, but he knows that. There's a recent European study using the Personal Wellbeing Index, a well-established tool for measuring subjective well-being. And I won't go into details, but the graph shows in orange the results, the level of satisfaction of the autistic group, and in green the control group. The satisfaction with different areas of your life, such as satisfaction with your personal health, with how much you achieved in your life, with your contribution to the community, security, and so on. And you see the scores of autistic people are lower in every area. There's even now studies that kind of summarize the studies, so-called meta-analysis study. And here's a Dutch one that show that across the lifespan, people with autism experience a much lower quality of life compared to people without autism. Now, one of the remarkable results of this study as well, during the meta-analysis of all the other studies, is that it seems that age, IQ, and symptom severity do not predict quality of life. And that challenges one of the main assumptions that many people have. The default idea is often this one. If we could only improve their skills, people with autism, their communication, their social skills, work on their rigidity, if they would be less autistic, then they would be happier. That's kind of a default paradigm. And I disagree with that. I think it's the other way around. And now watch my very nice animation in the next slide. Look, wow. I'm proud of this. I think it's the other way around. More well-being will make them less autistic, even if that is the goal. And why is that so? Because researchers have discovered that there is a link between negative feelings and level of functioning, also on cognitive functioning. This is just an example, study by Barbara Fredrickson, who showed that if you don't feel well, you're more into details and you're more rigid in your thinking. And that's true for all of us. Whether you are autistic or not. On the other hand, if you feel well, if you have positive feelings, you will be more flexible in your thinking, you will be more flexible in your cognitive function, and so on. Now, I put them in green: detail, focus, rigidity, and thinking. You recognize these words? You know them, don't you? Where have you heard them before? Talking about autism. So in other words, if we would increase the happiness of autistic people, maybe they would also function on a higher level. And that's not typically autistic, because research done on 275,000 people has shown that successful outcomes are not kind of the cause of happiness, but are the result of happiness. In other words, happy people are more successful in their professional career, they are more successful in their relationships, they are healthier, and they even live longer. There was one study with nuns, and the happy nuns lived 7 years longer on average than the unhappy nuns. Yeah, you can find that study. So, even if you want to work on these areas, there's nothing wrong with that, but maybe make sure that the autistic people you work or live with are happy, because if they are happier, they will have better outcome scores even on the traditional measures. So I think if you work on the happiness of autistic people, you do it for yourself as a society as well, because it's better for society that people are happy, because they are healthier, they have better jobs, they pay taxes, and so on. So the goal is not less autistic. Let that be obvious. The goal is autistically happy. Now, probably you ask, How do you do that? Okay. Now, there's not much time. I will cover just a couple of things on both sides, pleasant life and meaningful life, and I start with the pleasant life. The first thing is there's a lot of mistakes that we make in general, and the first one is that we have what I would call neurotypical projections. We think that what makes non-autistic people happy is exactly the same what makes autistic people happy. Happiness is very personal. This boy, for instance, he was always standing in the corner of the playground, and then teachers gave him a social story to teach him how to join in to play with the other children. And then he said, I don't want that. I'm perfectly happy here. You know why? I like to watch other children play, but I don't want to play with them. And what's wrong with that? If that makes him happy. Now, the other extreme is that we start from stereotyped ideas about autism and enforce them to autistic people. As this boy with autism, who is known to be very hypersensitive to sound, at a given moment he asked his parents and his caretakers if he could go to a rock concert by Metallica. I don't know if you know Metallica. That's not your soft relaxation music, you know. In a big crowd, 50,000 people, and you know how Metallica fans smell and how they look like, and eating hamburgers, and they told him not to go because he was sensitive, hypersensitive. You know what? I will come back to that. If that's what he wants and if that makes him happy, why shouldn't we do that? In other words, try not to fill in advance and try not to assume what makes people with autism happy. So it's time we need to develop tools to measure happiness and well-being. I made the mistake myself. I have this autism stress inventory. It's very popular. It's used in the workshop we run at Autism Central on stress management. And people fill in all the causes of stress for a person with autism, starting with sensory stimuli and then social things. And you know, at the end of day one, when they have filled in the whole questionnaire, all my participants are depressed. So we changed it into an Autism Good Feeling questionnaire, which is, you can download it freely at our website in Dutch, but there is now, there is a Danish translation already, and an English one is on the way. Now, I've described other ways in this article of this very good special issue of Good Autism Practice on autism and happiness. And then there are some ideas, such as the good feeling sensory circuit that we developed. Now, we're not the only ones. There's a lot of people out there doing the same now, like Katie Godion, who use these sensory preference cards that you use to assess not the sensory dislikes of people with autism, but their sensory likes. So I know there's no sensory profiles and so on. What I dream of is a well-being profile for every person with autism. So doing assessment of positive feelings. And I think a well-being profile of every unique individual with autism would be more informative than an IQ profile. Now, talking about sensory issues, then people start to think about, oh, yes, we know that. That's called autism friendliness. I think we're all into autism friendliness right now, but there is a risk here, and there is a pitfall, because sometimes I see forms of autism friendliness that I think are overprotecting autistic people. So an autism-friendly environment, remember, happiness is not only positive feelings, it's about positive and negative feelings. I think an autism-friendly environment is not avoiding challenges and obstacles. It's helping people to face the challenges and to overcome the obstacles. Because, and my next slide will show a puppy, because research has shown that puppies make people feel better. Because happiness is not the absence, you're supposed to say, oh, no. Yeah, okay. Happiness is not the absence of problems, but the ability to deal with them. I'm not saying that. There's research showing that indeed well-being is all about the balance between resources and challenges. And at Autism Central, we work actively with this model. At Autism Central, we developed a model describing the key ingredients of an autism-friendly approach. I don't have time to go into detail, but it's easy to remember the key ingredients. They're the first 6 letters of the alphabet. Everything starts with understanding how a person with autism understands the world, autistic thinking. Then we create basic comfort so they can get into the flow to learn new things. We use a lot of concrete communication. Double track is what I'm going to talk about. And then we had a bit of a problem. We wanted to talk about individualization, but that's with an I, and that doesn't belong to the first 6 letters of the alphabet. So we call this each person is unique. And then it has to be functional. Now, this double track, and that's what I want to talk about. I think when it's about happiness, we should use 2 tracks. That's the double track approach that we stand for at Autism Central. And one part is changing the environment to become more autism friendly and adapting the environment. The other one is teaching skills to autistic people to overcome the obstacles that they face in life. And I learned this from autistic women like Ross Blackburn, who I think will speak at this conference as well, Temple Grandin. Ross Blackburn said, it's not because I'm autistic you have to lower your expectations. I need high expectations, but they need to go together with high levels of support. And Temple Grandin says, yeah, I'm successful in my life, but only because my mother just knew how hard to push me. So I think if we don't take away the challenges, but we give people with autism the tools to face the challenges, it's also showing that we believe in their strengths. If you take away all the challenges, you're actually saying that people with autism are weak, and they are not weak. The research has shown that despite difficulties that many autistic adults have, they seem to be able to deal with adversity and cope well with challenges. Of course, from time to time they will need support there, but they can. There's a term already known for ages in psychology. That's the term learned helplessness. We should be careful when thinking about happiness and creating autism-friendly environment that we don't install learned helplessness in autistic people. Now, it all started with Martin Seligman, one of the guys now from the positive psychology approach. He had 3 kinds of dogs, and they got an electric shock. In those days, you could do that. Can't do that anymore. Now, there were dogs who were paired. So if dog number 2, the first one just got a harness, dog number 2 got a shock, and every time he got a shock, another dog who was paired with that dog got a shock as well. The difference was the first dog could press a lever and then the shock stopped. The second one could do nothing. Now, at the end, they both had the equal amount of shocks. But one dog had learned that he could make the shock stop, and the other one was helpless. He didn't get more shocks. Then Seligman put the dogs in a disc cage where, again, there was an electric shock. And what he saw was that the dogs who were in the first condition, able to press the lever, now jumped over to the other side where they didn't get a shock. And the dogs who did not learn that they could control the environment just sat there and had a lot of pain and suffered a shock. And that's called learned helplessness, which means that we should give control to people to face the challenges. Don't avoid them. I'm very happy there's a lot of adaptations here at this conference, but many of them are not just taking away stimuli, but give people with autism the control over the environment. And this is linked to the third term in this conference. It's all about empowerment. Give autistic people the power. So the same is true for all sensory issues. They are linked a lot, not exclusively, a lot to uncertainty and lack of control. I see now conferences where you're not allowed to applaud. You have to do this silly thing like that. Now, last April, I was in Dublin, and I talked to a lot of autistic people. I said, do you like applause? And some said yes, and some said no. But those who said no said that it was especially because they didn't know when people would applaud and for how long. So it's the uncertainty and the unpredictability. So therefore, I will end this talk with an autism-friendly applause, the one that I introduced in Dublin last April. It's all about predictability. Here's another puppy. Look. Huh? Wow. At our center, we have volunteers, and one of the volunteers helps us with the gardening. And he was very much stressed by the dogs of the neighbor barking, until we told him the next time he worked in the garden, you know, there's a chance that the dogs will bark. And afterwards he said, I could cope much better with the dogs because I knew they were there and I knew there was some barking coming. So it's all about predictability and clarity if you want to be autism friendly. That comes first and the rest comes later. Now, every year there's Autism Awareness Day, and we did this year, we sat together with more than 30 adults with autism and ask them what you think is autism friendly. And we put all their notes on a curtain, the autism friendliness curtain. And you know, most of the notes, it's in Flemish there, most of the notes reflect predictability. This is from a man who says, I think my sister is very autism friendly because she always tells me in advance when she's going to visit me. Predictability. Okay, now, a second thing is, when we think about happiness and well-being, most people think about these things. Sit down, relax, take a raisin in your hand, do some mindfulness, try to replace negative ideas by positive ones. Mind the kitten and the rabbit here, the bunny, because some people say it's not only puppies that give a good feeling. Now, this is all about, that's something we often overlook, and that has to do with healthy, the second theme of this conference. Because we do know that, based on research, that children with autism, for instance, are less fit than their non-autistic peers. And that's because they don't have enough physical activity. So if you want to work on happiness, don't forget to make sure there's enough physical exercise, because there's evidence that physical activities lower the stress hormone cortisol and take away the anxiety in people. Remark the dog on the right side as well. And there's another thing, sleep. Again, there are sleep issues in autism. They are well documented. And I hope they will be covered here at the conference. But those are the things that we often overlook when we talk about happiness. Happiness is often blah, 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 psycho stuff and so on. Make sure they have enough and good sleep. For instance, I need to take 9 hours of sleep, and that's because Betty White has this advice. Okay, now these are just some things about the left side, the good life, positive feelings, some final remarks on the meaningful life. Here again, I think we need to make a U-turn. It's often asked, what does society need to do to give autistic people a good life? What can society offer to autistic people? I think it's about time we make a U-turn and ask ourselves also, what can autistic people offer to society, so that they are not only on the receptive side. And one of the things we need to stress here is the importance of having a job, employment. I think every autistic person should have a job. We will have to be very creative in defining what a job is. I know that. But it is now evidence that employment leads to more well-being. Having a job gives you something to do, gives structure in your life, and you have the feeling to contribute to society. And every autistic person can contribute to society. I tell this short story here that some of you already heard, because I mention it at every conference, about a boy with autism who loved the sound of breaking glass. And I'm not talking about the song here. So he smashed glass. What do you do with a boy with autism who also has an intellectual disability, who's into breaking glass? You try to hide glasses, don't you? And I can assure you, the more you hide glasses, the better an expert he will become in spotting glassware from 5 miles distance. Why don't we make a job of it? So what they did is they taught him, I make a long story short, they taught him to throw bottles in this recycling bin for glass. Unfortunately, the parents were not alcoholics. So they only had 2 bottles, which is not enough to exercise. So what they did is they asked the neighbors, do you have bottles? Now, to make a long story short, this boy, who also has an intellectual disability, nonverbal, is now, when he comes home, collecting bottles from the neighbors, and he's the responsible in the neighborhood for the recycling of the bottles. Isn't that an inspiring story? I think we need more stories like that. And I'm going a step further, because you know what? If you want to be happy, and this is based on research, make other people happy. That's the biggest source of happiness, making other people happy. So, there's research showing, this Japanese and Dutch study, that by being kind and being grateful, it makes you more happy. So we need to teach autistic children from young age on to be kind and to be grateful, so that they give other people a good feeling, and so that they are wanted, not just tolerated and accepted, but wanted. And you can do that by, for instance, installing a routine of giving 3 compliments a day to another person. Small things. So here I would like to introduce my second term, and I'm almost at the end, so don't worry. The meaningful life. It's not just enough to work on positive feelings, joy and pleasure and safety. That's the autism friendliness part. I would like to introduce a new term here, namely autistic friendliness. We should teach autistic friendliness, and I'm sure every autistic person can be very friendly, so that they give other people a good feeling and that they are wanted. And in that way, that's how we work on neuroharmony. That's how we make those different minds meet. Because if we could combine autism friendliness with autistic friendliness, then we will have a nice harmony. So as a parent, as a teacher, as a caretaker, see yourself as a conductor, bringing together all these different notes into a pleasant combination and a nice harmony. And let's now move on to the autism-friendly applause, because I'm at the end. So don't start applauding, I will tell you. It's all about control and predictability. Okay. If you don't like applause, here's what you can do. You can cover your ears, and there are several options. You can use plugs, you can put your fingers in your ears, you can do whatever you want. The second thing is predictability. Don't applaud. Oh, no, the second alternative is, I'll give you now time to leave the room if you think applause is too difficult for you, but you decide. Empowerment, you're in charge. If you want to take a risk, stay. Now, and the last thing is predictability. There will be applause for 4 seconds, because I don't deserve more than that. And it will be indicated by this applause meter, which means on the next slide, that will be my final slide, then I invite you to applaud, but the moment this one is ended, you stop. So everybody knows that the applause will take 4 seconds. The last time I did this in Dublin, a person with autism came up to me and said, it's actually 3 seconds, 48 milliseconds. So let's say around 4 seconds. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention. That is more than 4 seconds.